massive wins over the best to do it. And now she's moving up a weight class. And a lot of people are actually asking, why is this matchup happening? AJ, why is this matchup happening between Manon Fiorot and Rose Namajunas?
I was kind of hoping you didn't bring that up, Derek, because I'm wondering the exact same thing, man. It seems like Rose Namajunas is just going right for the top, and maybe it's because she has the Ronda Rousey effect now, where you can't cast Ronda Rousey with anybody below the championship. Rose is kind of hitting that exact peak where you can't really cast her with anybody below top 5. It's doing her an injustice, doing the girl she's fighting an injustice. So you have to put her with somebody up top, somebody that's in the mix, so that way you can get your money worth and actually get her to the title shot as fast as you can. That's about the only reason I can see, because other than that, Derek, this seems like a very dangerous fight for Rose Namajunas to take, with the size, with the length, going up a weight class. We've seen her be manhandled in the cage, especially in the wrestling situation where she got dumped on her head, and that with a bigger size does scare me a little bit. I talked earlier in the beginning where Knockout City might be coming right here, Derek. Do you see that as the easiest path for Manon Fiorot knockout against Rose Namajunas, or is there something else that Manon Fiorot presents to this fight?
Yeah, man, that's a lot to unpack right there. First, let me hit on a couple points, man. First and foremost, I don't agree with your reasoning on why we're seeing this matchup here, so I'll talk about that next. Do we see a knockout here? Very likely. Does it come from Manon Fiorot? I think very unlikely. I think that's actually like the most unlikely scenario here, because though she has a bunch of finishes, lots of first round, second round finishes, she has 2 finishes in the UFC, right? I think it was Victoria Leonardo and what was it, Tabitha Ricci? Were those her 2 finishes? And though the Baby Shark win has aged very well, you have to really take into consideration. You fought Bueno Silva, Jennifer Maia, Chukagian, and you had to skate past them with decisions where there was very little damage kind of scored throughout that fight, right? So I think that when you rack up a bunch of these finishes before the UFC, I mean, we say it all the time. We said it a lot when we first started the show, right? The UFC is where streaks come to die. So I just don't see it against Rose Namajunas, who, if you look at the last 3 losses in her last 10, one of them has come by finish, and the only way they could finish her is by slamming her on her head, which is a very unconventional finish, right? So there's that part. Here's the other part. I don't think that we're seeing this matchup just because Rose Namajunas is some star and she can only fight the top 5. I think the reality is Rose Namajunas became stagnant in the strawweight division. You're a multiple-time champion. You've done everything there is to do. You move up to a new weight class, new challenges, new excitement, right? Put on a little bit of size and attack some new challenges at the end of the day. I think that's why we're seeing this, because we have to address one thing really quickly. I think that we love Rose Namajunas as a fighter, but a lot of her outside of the octagon life that's going on is very troubling when you think of inactivity, emotional instability, just all types of craziness. But do you factor any of that in? Can you, when it comes down to a fist fight, man? What does that have to do with her time in the cage?
I think you have to, Derek, to analyze where they're going into the fight. But at the same point, with the professionalism that these fighters are at right now, they've been doing this for years now. There's not really much that's going to outside affect when you're in the cage and in that performance. But my question comes into what happens when it's affecting in the camp, and that kind of thing, your mental stability all throughout your preparation. It might not be the same as it was 2 years ago when you were champ mentality. So that does come into play at least a little bit, because you're right. As a Rose Namajunas fan, as a Thug Rose fan from day one, the inactivity is very concerning. The having to rebrand, like you're talking about, to have these kind of matchups is a little bit concerning, because it's not safe anymore, when you're a Thug Rose fan, you're Ben. She always had an X factor going against it. Now she's up in this new realm, which, hey, if you're being unsafe, now you are growing in that. So I do like that for Rose. But this does seem like a very interesting match to take up on the first one with the striking, which, usually Rose kind of has that advantage, but now she's losing the power. Do you think jiu-jitsu is going to come into this one, Derek? That's where I was kind of going with this and how to pull it around, because Thug Rose has, in the time off, she has been training a lot more jiu-jitsu, at least in recently. She just competed. Do you think that's going to come into play for this camp right here?
This is another one, man, where I just think that the context behind this matchup is so messy and so misunderstood, man. Thug Rose came onto the UFC as a legit jiu-jitera, right? As a legit grappler. That's how she came into the UFC. There's been no loss of jiu-jitsu, gain of jiu-jitsu. She fought in a jiu-jitsu competition. Like, wow, like that's crazy. Oh my God. It's just something that you do outside of camp. You know what I mean? Outside of when your regular scheduled fights to get back into competition and just to kind of shake off some of the cobwebs and stuff. So I don't think that has anything to do with it because I think that Namajunas clear cut is a by far better grappler than Fiorot. I think Fiorot has a little bit of that judo chop and that strength and stuff like that she definitely has with some of her throws and things of that nature. But I think the real question that you're asking me, AJ, what it sounds like is how does the power and how does the size differential of Manon Fiorot factor into those grappling exchanges? And in a nutshell, I will say I do think it's troubling. Fiorot is going to be a lot stronger, a lot bigger than Rose Namajunas, and not even height-wise. She's got a couple inches in height, but she's just thick stature. Like we talked about for Erin Blanchfield. Santos was bigger, but Blanchfield was just bigger. You know what I'm saying? Thicker, right? So is that enough though, AJ? Even let's just say Fiorot has more luck because she's stronger and she could hold her up against the cage for a little bit. Let's talk about the X's and O's of the striking. Let's talk about that right there. Fiorot is very downstream, downline momentum fighter, right? Great with blitzes, kind of falls off when it comes down to cutting angles. Rose Namajunas will cut angles, fantastic head movement and footwork, and will constantly switch back and forth with their stances. Does not spam one move the way that Manon Fiorot constantly spams that side kick, which is super effective. But I think that Namajunas might have an answer for that given how often it's used. Let's talk about that. What do you think?
100%, Derek. I couldn't have described Rose Namajunas' striking any better. You're right. The footwork's amazing. The headwork's amazing. The combos, crisp as can be. The now moving up the power might be something we're seeing, but in this kind of fight, if she's able to put the volume on Manon Fiorot, I think it's going to nullify a lot of the power that Fiorot presents. And just being like that with that counter striking, I do think Rose has the basically all around better mixed martial arts set of tools than Fiorot in this fight. But you can't counter out just because of that power differential. We've seen Rose get cracked. We've seen her lose. I mean, like you said, one of the worst losses is a very unconventional way. So I don't think a technical beating is in store for Rose Namajunas anytime in the future. It has to be one of those unconventional things that just kind of comes up. Maybe Manon Fiorot gets lucky. Derek, what do you think? Is that possible for her to get lucky? Obviously, yes, it is. But which way do you think she's luckiest to get in this fight?
I don't think it's really a luck thing with Fiorot, man. I think if she's going to win, it's going to be very similar to the Chukagian win where she just outvolumes Namajunas, because that is actually one of my concerns. So to kind of round this whole entire thing out, Namajunas at plus 155 underdog, I get it. Like, I get it. I'm not like, oh my God, this is ludicrous. I'm like, okay, makes sense. Fiorot is bigger. She's stronger, tends to throw more volume in the fight. Namajunas is a little bit of a slow starter. She generally like kind of does a big feeling out process. I just think that this is one of those picks where while momentum seems to favor Fiorot, I think in the grand scheme of things, the momentum really favors Rose Namajunas in terms of this is the, how would you say, AJ, legitimately, in terms of like skill set and in terms of like the talent that she's fought and over her last 10, this has got to be kind of bottom tier for Rose Namajunas compared to Esparza, Wei Li, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Andrade, Karate Hottie, Kovacevic, Tisha Torres. Like if you really list off that name, you're like, Fiorot is good. She's very, very good. But compared to those fighters, just not quite there, right?
100%. The hit list doesn't even really compare. And yes, Manon Fiorot might be the up and coming of this division. But when you list a hit list off like that, there's killer's row basically for all on Rose Namajunas' side.
100%. So listen, folks, this is a risky pick to be completely frank with you guys, but I like Rose Namajunas. Another case of y'all must have forgot. And I'm going to roll with the AJ's prop lock, actually. I like that plus 125 decision. I don't think we see a finish here. What do you think?
It's a prop lock for a reason, Derek. I don't really see a finish either. I do see a calculated fight out of Rose Namajunas. That's why I'm betting with her. This one's still going to be fun, though. Don't get me wrong. But Manon Fiorot does have a lot to possess. I just think Rose is going to get it done technically.
That's right. Listen to my man. He says it's a prop lock for a reason. How dare you question my answer? You know what the answer is. Let's go. All right.